How about the Chinese economy?
China's in a kind of interesting position right now. We're continuing to see successes out of the Chinese economy, right? So we've just got DeepSeek has been a big surprise and something that people didn't think was possible, bringing high quality AI out of sort of a lesser set of resources, chips, etc. So that points to strength in the economy. We know about the success of electric cars. We talked about the challenges earlier to the German automobile industry. China continues to make progress on batteries and solar and wind and renewables. So we're kind of, we're in the low fours for our forecast this year. There's still some bright spots for the Chinese economy. And again, still the fastest growing major economy in the world.
Are you shocked by DeepSeek?
I'm not a tech guy. I think it's fair to say there was a lot of surprise here in the U.S. About DeepSeek. Everyone was focusing on the U.S. tech firms, and we know about the restrictions on some of the high-end chips to China. So the fact that DeepSeek was able to do this with apparently fewer resources and a lower environmental footprint was super interesting as a result. As we know, the technology's got all this promise, and there's kind of a race going on, a competition, but there's also the energy part of data centers, which is, not moving in the direction of sustainability because they're going to be powered by a lot of them are going to be powered by natural gas here in the US. So for China to come up with something that was in the same league with less sophisticated chips and a lower footprint was quite an accomplishment. So this has obviously started a new round of competition. We'll have to see where it goes. But the short answer was yes. There's a lot of surprise here. We saw the market reaction for NVIDIA, for example, right, which sells those high-end chips, was quite negative. But this is going to be very dynamic, right? We know everything around, Gen AI is going to be a multi-year thing. There's a little bit of economic competition. There's a little bit of geopolitical competition. DeepSeek is open source, right? So everything they did is publicly available. So I still think we're kind of early days on all this stuff. So it's going to be super, super interesting and important how this all plays out.
I think DeepSeek is a sample for China's high-quality development. So what's your comment on China's high-quality development?
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing. So I lived in Asia for a while. I actually lived in Hong Kong about 20 years ago, and it wasn't that long ago where China was exporting and producing relatively low-end products, right? So it was, backpacks and shoes and footwear, and then China has moved up the value chain quite quickly. I don't think that has fully been appreciated by some people, but if you look at what China's producing, and we've discussed a couple of those in the last few minutes, whether it's Gen AI or electric vehicles or batteries. Chinese firms are at the cutting edge on all of those. So I think that's definitely a success. China has offloaded some of the lower end industries to places like Vietnam and Southeast Asia, which is what's supposed to happen as you move up the value chain. But yeah, it's hard to disagree with the notion that China in some of these key industries now is very cutting edge.
How can Chinese economy continue to keep its momentum?
Growth is all about productivity. So if countries are going to continue to advance and prosper, we have to have continuous productivity gains. And, you can only do so much investment in capital deepening, and China's labor force is starting to slow, which is what we're seeing in Japan and some of the countries in Europe. So the driver of growth has to be productivity. So the question or the challenge is to make sure, to continue to have high growth. China needs to continue to have high productivity growth. We've just mentioned a few sectors where that's happening, but that needs to be sustained over a long period of time. Another good example is actually the US, because the US is outperforming many of the advanced countries after COVID for the last few years. And a lot of that's productivity. We're seeing good productivity in the US growth as economy as well, and we're not seeing it in Europe. And again, that's driving this wedge between the two. So it's the same kind of arithmetic applies to China. If you're going to continue to grow quickly and keep up with the competition, it's got to come from productivity.
As you mentioned, you spent several years in Hong Kong, so I think you know some about Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau, Greater Bay Area. What impressions does the Greater Bay Area leave on you?
Yeah, well, I think Hong Kong plays a special role, and it's kind of the financial gateway to China for the rest of the world. So I think that's always been Hong Kong's strength. I know there's been the Greater Bay Area has been sort of a development region, but for Hong Kong in particular, it's going to be the financial services and the onshore center for offshore money, if that's the right way to put it. But there's also a lot of as you know very well, there's a lot of innovation and dynamism around Guangdong and that part of China. So I mean, all of that comes together. That sort of makes sense.
Do you think what role can the Greater Bay Area play in the world?
As the RMB becomes a more internationalized currency and as China kind of moves up the value chain for a lot of these cutting edge products, you have the financial role of Hong Kong and the innovation role of Guangdong. So I think without knowing too many of the details, for me, as someone who spent some time in that region, those would be kind of the obvious advantages of that area.
You mentioned renminbi becomes a more internationalized currency, so I want to talk a little more on that. How do you think about the future of renminbi's internationalization?
Yeah, well, the dollar's been really sticky as the world's reserve currency. It's come down a bit. If you look at the rankings of the global currencies, US is still pretty clearly on top, followed by the euro. And then there's another group, the RMB's in that group, the pound sterling's in there, Canadian dollar, Australian dollar. Chinese RMB has made a lot of progress as a trade currency. So as China goes out into the world through, Belt and Road and just other initiatives, a lot of bilateral trade is now taking place in RMB. So its role as a trade currency, being one side of a trade transaction, has risen quite a bit. I think looking forward, I would expect it to continue to be used in trade transactions as China kind of builds up its trade and supply network, but maybe a question mark around some of the other stuff, right? The dollar doesn't necessarily have to be the number one currency forever, but dollar's been surprisingly sticky and resilient, so I think we're still in a dollar world for the foreseeable future.
All right, Paul, that's all for our interview. Thank you for your time. Bye.
All right, it's a pleasure to talk with you and good luck.